Did I miss a meeting?
No, I think actually, Monty, you are referring to going through line by line at the urban design work group, which we did at that last meeting for that group. And we're doing the exact same thing right here and right now.
Okay.
We're gonna go through this bad boy line by line, and whenever somebody has something that they're like, I object, then like, let's just speak up, we'll pause, we'll talk it out, we'll rewrite it. So we want to make sure that everything in this letter represents a consensus-based agreement. So if some of it needs to be, you know, softened, then let's talk about that. If some of it needs to be strengthened in order to make sure that it represents the opinions of the group, if it needs to be deleted, let's do that. However, everything you guys have hopefully already read it is basically copied and pasted from your last homework assignment. So there are a couple statements in here that are kind of a amalgam of 2 to 4 people statements, because a lot of people were touching on the same subject matter, in which case I had to kind of get creative with my writing, but some of it is verbatim out of your guys' homework.
So with that in mind, we are going to read through this document, and as Tiffany was saying, please do interrupt at any point if there's something that you want to discuss further, or that you want to, you know, state that you're not comfortable with or anything like that. I guess before we just jump right in, were there any just really big picture statements, concerns that should be addressed before we start to look at it in more detail? Okay, so this is organized, as you can see. Just the first part is a little bit of background and a description of the group. Were there any questions or concerns about these first 3 introductory paragraphs?
Does it say anything about location? Because are we all like in the area? Does that matter?
Yeah.
It says that the meetings are held virtually in the center of that paragraph.
But where the work group members are based.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah, I don't really see any mention of that. I don't know how important that is, but
I think it's important.
Yep.
Russ gets a pass because he lives in the mayor's office.
Not literally, thankfully.
How do we want to phrase this in terms of our residents of, or local to, or
community stakeholders?
I like that.
I mean, I think other than Russ, is it fair to say all members are either business owners or residents on the east side of St. Paul? I'd have to go back and check my selection criteria worksheet thing, which is not in front of me.
I'm both.
Same, yeah.
I know John's business is on the east side already. Yeah. Thank you, Becky.
Business owners is the right word, or work within?
Are residents or business owners or own businesses on the east side of St. Paul.
Okay. Moving on.
Mm-hmm.
So then this first list here is focused on areas in which the work group members are expressing support for goals or approaches that the port is already taking in the project. So these are the ones that are, being planned for and supported by work group members. So ranging from carbon-free, lead for communities, lead for buildings, energy efficiency, local PV, no natural gas, all electric, district energy, green infrastructure, EV charging, contamination remediation, and wetlands. Any comments on this list of 11 items?
I think on number 10, removing the mercury contamination, that's also an environmental justice issue. I don't know if that's in our purview to discuss, but I know that the east side has a disproportionate number of brownfield sites due to the sort of industrial history. And so that remediation is really important for this particular part of the city, I think. So it might just be something to note, to add to that.
Yeah.
I do like working the words environmental justice into that phrase somehow. Disproportionate amount of brownfield sites exist, and this cleanup would further environmental justice goals or something. You're a pretty good writer, Becky. I won't try and wordsmith you live in real time.
Well, it's very stressful doing it live like this.
It's hard writing with so many people looking over your shoulder.
I'm usually a pretty good speller too, but
It's like trying to write on a whiteboard or
yeah.
To go back to number 9, just a clarification question. What do we mean by every parcel? How many, is that every, I don't know how it's chunked out or.
I think I counted, we were writing a grant last week or a couple weeks ago, and I had to start making up parcel ID numbers for them, and I was up to 20.
Okay.
Well, and then I think with that one, including EV charging stations and EV ready parking areas within every parcel. So every parcel being the high density, lower density, and then light industrial. And there are going to be requirements. It's already written in the master plan and then also into the covenants that there's a certain percentage of those parking spots that have to have an EV charging station and or be EV ready. So the conduit has to be ready to get something plugged into it at that parking spot.
And
that's a really big deal because that's a major cost of charging stations.
Yeah.
So a lot cheaper if you don't have to rip up the curb and asphalt to do it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Gilly, were you having any thoughts about the within every parcel maybe isn't as important as something else, or does that answer make you feel like this is appropriate?
Yeah, I didn't know what it was referring to. Maybe if this document, I know it's, if it's outward facing, we might just want to clarify that for everyday people who might be reading over this.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wonder if it would be clear to just say either throughout the community, or if we want to have some sort of quantification of.
About, does within each development, does that make it more clear that we're talking about within each building's development?
We
That
could
does,
say
yeah.
within each of the 20 parcels. I mean, just to quantify it, like what that is referring to.
We don't I think it's going to be 20, but we haven't platted the site yet. So it could be 19, could be 25.
Gotcha.
And we know that the low density ones will be subdivided after the fact as well.
Yeah.
What does that mean?
What is it to subdivide the parcels?
So John, we're not going to
Yeah.
sell like individual lots for a duplex, or, you know, we would sell a half a block as an outlot, and then there would be lot splits, subdivisions of those to make them small enough to house a unit or a development. But the platted outlots will be larger pieces of land that will be sold and then chopped up smaller and smaller to get to the right size for whatever's being proposed.
And presumably
Yeah.
there'll be parcels that are essentially green space, right? And so is it like within every developed parcel?
That's a good point. We're not totally sure that the Parks Department plans on including parking anywhere.
They've said they do not plan on.
They said that they were leaning toward no. But they won't know for sure until they go through their own planning process. So within every developed parcel.
Kind of like making it just a little bit more broad, as long as it doesn't feel like then it's losing well, that could just be one station here and one station there. So what if we had something like include, I don't know, significant amounts or what the right word is, of EV charging stations throughout the development or throughout the community?
Well, so just to circle back, this is a statement of the Port Authority and the master plan between the two of them are already saying this is going to happen. And so this is the group just saying, like, we're glad that that's happening. We support this decision. So I feel like the development is maybe it could all be tucked off into one corner, you know, because we're talking about the Heights holistically as a redevelopment. And that's certainly not the impression that we want to give, and not the intention of what's been stated previously in the master plan and by the Port Authority's draft sustainability covenants. So
really is within each development parcel.
yeah, so within every development parcel, I think that makes the most sense as well.
Anything else?
So how does this? Yeah. How does work? I'm gonna make sure my volume isn't too loud here. So we're not going to get specific on how many spots need to have EV, or is each parking spot required to have the underground infrastructure to put one in? Because we know that 50 years from now, 95% of those spots or more are going to need EV charging. Well, not necessarily, because most people currently charge at home overnight.
Yeah,
right.
Which is why we've written
percentages.
We've written percentages in, John, that would apply to each parcel, and we took that nighttime charging into account. So the industrial parcels require a little less, but there is percentages written into the draft covenants.
Is there any numbers for amperage? Because the amount of amperage that's needed is going up rapidly as battery technology changes charge rates. And it's a phenomenal amount of amperage too. So one could easily have have to dig something up if you didn't have, has
We,
anything been done along those lines? It's a moving target, I know.
yeah, we haven't committed to anything that specific yet, and this is this group's sort of affirmation of where we're going, where we've already stated we're going. That could be when we get down into this group's recommendations rather than just affirmations. That could be a suggestion that we add there, that, you know, attention should be paid to emerging technologies and various electrical needs, you know, emerging electrical needs or something like that. But I think we'll come back to that when we get down below, won't we, Becky or Tiffany?
Yes, that would be the kind of cadence of the entire letter. It's like,
Okay.
you guys are already doing this stuff and we like it. We'd like you to do this extra stuff. And then we'd like you to think a little bit harder about these remaining items that seem unresolved.
Got it.
I get the interest in being a little bit vague because there's some unknowns. But I wonder about some adjectives here, like sufficient to meet future needs or something along those lines. Because to John's point and others' points about, well, not every spot's going to need charging, but there's a formula to figure out how much of it ultimately does. And rather, the current language sort of leaves it as essentially you could interpret it as long as there's a charger in each development parcel, we're good.
Could be hooked up to a pixie wheel, pinwheel.
So we could just add include sufficient EV charging stations within every development parcel that address future needs.
I like that.
You know, to address.
That's vague in another direction. I like it.
It's not like we have gas pumps at every parking spot right now for gas vehicles. So it is a little bit weird that we would expect to be able to charge it wherever you park.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I think the expectation is
to parking meter.
The expectation is to be able to charge at home
Mm-hmm.
and then some charging at other locations. And what is that sum, right? But so I think the language around sufficient for future needs covers it.
Yeah.
One of the complications with sufficient charging at home is that, like in a multifamily building, theoretically, you don't need, not everyone needs to charge every night, but usually you have like an assigned parking space, right? And so are people going to be flexible and let other people use their spots? And anyway, it gets complicated.
Any other comments on 1 through 11?
I did have a comment on 11 too, of just overall this point, like I agree with restoring wetlands, of course, but again, just kind of this one is a little vague, and like how many of the wetlands are we talking about? And then what is this group's idea of restoration? Because restoration looks different for every different piece of land, every different wetland. So I think just ironing out or adding a little more language here to iron some of those points out.
So just for a little background information, there's 5.6 acres of wetland on the site. 2.6 of them are going to stay exactly where they are currently. One of the wetlands right smack dab in the middle is, so far as we know, not contaminated at all. So that one, we're just going to put a fence around it that's 50 feet away from the edge of the wetland and just don't go there. Don't regrade, don't touch it, don't do anything. So that one is going to be left in as pristine of a condition as is possible. The other ones that are staying in their current locations, they do have mercury contamination. So they will need to be extensively dredged, essentially, to get all the icky goo out of there. And then the contaminated goo gets sent to a landfill. And then everything needs to be restored from there. So that's restoring the organic soil material that would be on the top layer of the wetland, even part under the water. And then it would be restoring it with a robust planting strategy of seeding, plugs, shrubs, and tree plantings. So that's what we mean by restoration, is to put the soil and the plants back So as it starts to grow, it's not just growing random weeds, it's growing an intentional plant community. So that's already part of the plan. So do we want to just reiterate that those elements, the restoration of the soil profile and the restoration of an emergent wetland ecology, and it's also like a mesic prairie ecology kind of wetland.
Right. Yeah, I think just add like restoration of a native plant ecology that would have been found naturally there.
Is that accurate, Tiffany? It will be native?
That is the intention.
Do we need a verb here?
Restoration includes remediation of soil profile, or I would say restoration. Remediation is taking the contaminated soil out, and then restoration includes rebuilding the soil profile, basically, and installing native plant communities via seeds, plugs, and plant installation.
Say installing.
Installing, yep.
So not what I think of when I think of
It
plants.
sounds very clinical.
Yeah, so clinical.
But yes, we install the plants and then we watch them grow, and then we come back and say, we need to fill in the gaps and do it again another year later.
Does it help to note that the preservation aspect of it too, that at least one of the wetlands will be preserved?
Mm-hmm.
The ones that can?
Preservation of non-contaminated wetlands
Yeah.
in their existing state.
Yeah.
That one actually is a managed sea wetland, the one that's not contaminated, which means that it has like a fair bit of invasive species in it. So it's kind of a pick your poison when it comes to interventions with natural ecologies, because those invasive species, they kind of just got there on their own. So how much do we want to disrupt the existing ecology, even if it's not in a textbook perfect sense a native ecology? It's still a very functional one. So do you guys have any opinions on the removal of invasive species in that one area? It's not so bad.
What are the invasive?
Oh, the classics like cattails and things like that. You know, I'm sure there's Creeping Charlie somewhere in there, and just all the mustards that really aren't supposed to be growing in this area. Cattails are a big one.
I think that point I might just leave more vague then, as far as like leave it in its existing state with all of these displaced plants. Just to leave it more vague. So in the future, potentially, if people wanted to, they could do some different types of restoration at that one too.
Yeah, so why don't we say protect and preserve non-contaminated wetlands from all construction activities? So we're not letting trucks just randomly drive through the area, which squishes the soil and makes it harder for the correct type of plants, the native plants, to thrive. And then that way it's a statement about how the interventions are taking place for the time being during development, but it totally leaves the door open for future restoration efforts when it comes to invasive species.
That sounds good.
I learned something about cattails. Wow.
There are good cattails, and then there are aggressive cattails. And the ones that you see on the side of the road are the aggressive ones. So the more you learn about invasive species, you'll never go walking through a park this way ever again. Because as soon as you can identify buckthorn, it's kind of like so green, but also so sad.
That look good? All right. Anything else on this section?
I'm excited that all these things are going to happen.
Us too.
Okay, so then the next section is identifying additional sustainability priorities and recommendations. So that could be on some of the same topics that are already included in the port's approach, but we could go a little bit farther or provide a little bit more detail. So reducing embodied carbon is something that we talked a lot about in this group and received some comments on. Supporting multimodal clean transportation. Maybe let's just take a look at these two.
I know I've asked about this before, but there are some rail lines that go right to the, I think, the south end of the site that I don't think they actually enter the site, but it seems like there could be some potential there for industrial use. I don't know if anyone has looked into that, but there is that potential there.
You know, we more often than not in modern light industrial development, we wind up removing rail spurs than adding them. There are so few businesses in the urban core that actually use, now if you're talking commodity shipments down in our river shipping terminals, that's a totally different thing. That's multimodal freight shipping. But you know, a lot of the businesses that years ago would use rail to ship product, they can't get on the rail because the commodities are buying up all the rail between the oil and the commodity bulk goods that we ship on and off of barges. I can't remember the last time we had one of our users actually need a rail spur and use a rail spur. And meanwhile, I can recall ripping out 10 or 12 of them.
Okay.
So Monty, and is it accurate to say that rail systems more often than not are used for raw materials than they are for refined products, which would be the focus of light industrial activity on the site?
I mean, from a single business, that is correct. I mean, it's much more raw materials, commodity products, or like, you know, super high volume manufacturing, which is also not generally what we see in these locations. It's pretty tough to get one of these rail operators to show up with like one rail car to put, you know, a couple of pallets of something of, you know, whatever your widgets are in. They want to fill up you know, you've heard the phrase unit train, right? That's what rail has become over the last couple of decades is, you know, the rail folks and the logistics folks want to buy a half a unit train, which is a mile-long train.
Yeah, and also just anecdotally on other projects that we've worked on in other municipalities in the Twin Cities that are adjacent to the rail corridors, the railroad companies are the most difficult entities to cooperate with, or to get them to cooperate with you, I should say. It's exceptionally challenging to get them on board with whatever it is. Like, we want to put a pedestrian walkway over your rails. They're like, no. That's.
You can tell us, yeah.
I tried to buy a piece of property next to my building from them. Oh my God.
Yeah, you know what you're talking about, John.
Railroads do not sell property. They know that they will never have more than they currently have, and they will never give it up.
Yeah.
Iani, you're muted if you have a comment.
Working with MTC is a cakewalk compared to rail. Yes.
Is this where this number 13, where we might want to add in something about future electrical, you know, changes that John was bringing up? I didn't see anywhere else that would make more sense than here.
Can you say that again, Becky?
John's point about the EVs, taking a look at as technology changes, what EV ready means might change as well.
Yes, this would be the logical location to include that.
Any thoughts about language?
So the intent.
I'll throw some stuff out there. I have no idea on language, but I have a Tesla semi truck on order. The amount of power it takes, and this is a big deal because of the carbon footprint that a truck has and the type of fuel it uses. And the amount of power it takes for the chargers is on the semi truck. Of course, you want to charge it very quickly, right? You're gonna, it's not like your car you drive a little ways every week. You may want to pull in and charge, and time is money and all that. So I don't really know how to say that in this section though. And I don't know if it's the best place to put it. I just want to make sure somebody realizes that this is a big deal, and to have trucks come to your place and have chargers really reduces the while they're unloading to be able to charge. I mean, there's so many things like that are going to make such a huge difference in adoption. But I don't know how to word it. I really don't, and maybe it's not the right place for it.
So is there
And
something that by including it, it will ultimately help like the larger effort of just adoption across companies, communities, the world?
yes, and you know, that's what this site is, right? This site is showing what's possible. And I think that's a critical aspect of it. The trucks take a very special charging network, charging system. It's probably going to be a DC charger to really charge them up fast enough. And the industrial buildings should have one on site. Now, where it's located and all that kind of stuff, the best place would probably be where they unload, because I mean, if they can pick up 20 miles while they're unloading, that's a huge deal. And the trucks, if you do the math on what it costs to drive an electric truck compared to a diesel truck, it's so phenomenally cheaper. It's you know, and of course they're possible to build, they're running right now, but we can't build the batteries fast enough, but it's gonna be happening. So I just don't know how to word it or how to put it in here.
So it seems like, John, you're actually talking about two separate topics. One, just thinking about EV charging, just more overall for regular people and their regular cars, and how there's a ever evolving technology and how we need to remain responsive to that and anticipating the quantity and amperage requirements of regular people and their regular cars, but then also very specifically for this light industrial use, including charging opportunities for these larger trucks where they're loading and unloading at their places of business.
Exactly. These trucks trucks will be coming in here. Not as bad as a distribution center, but trucks will be coming in all the time. And so having some sort of charge infrastructure there, and you know, and I'm brainstorming out loud too. I just don't want us to miss an opportunity.
Sure. What about something to the effect of keeping up to date on logistics with EV integration or something to that effect?
We can also come up with a draft and then run it past David Williams, who is the mechanical engineering guru who's been really helping behind the scenes inform a lot of the language that we're using in the sustainability covenants. And he can help wordsmith something to make it sound fluid.
David Williams, I can work with him on this.
Yeah,
I mean, the way and the way to really sort of future-proof this is to figure out, because it's a lot of power, right, for one of these DC fast chargers to charge a semi, and that, you know, from a like electrical perspective is going to require additional transformers, additional step down. It's and then the conduit, you know, the place for that wiring to come in. And so it's like, unlike the EV readiness, it's like it would be too expensive to actually wire something that you weren't sure was going to get used. But you want to at least create the space for that wiring to come in, and to have a plan with Excel about how the additional power would come to the site too. There's a lot of power we're talking about.
Yeah, and it has a ripple effect throughout the community. Because this truck's now driving over the road, and if it gets the power from where we are, because we've got, you know, we're cooking our solar panels to their limit, it's a big deal. That's what this is all about, is about reducing our footprint. So let me talk with Dave. Yeah.
What is the weight difference for an electric semi versus a diesel? Is that the challenge for the road infrastructure?
No, because they're limited on the maximum weight of the entire rig. So they fall within that. So it's been a challenge for Tesla to design it as light as possible so that they can carry the most cargo if possible, and, you know, within that weight limit. So, yeah.
This is one of those issues that could blow a hole in like the net zero energy equation for sure.
Yeah. Yeah, but yeah, and we would need a way to show that you know, there's a benefit there, right?
Right.
Yeah.
And that's where if you draw the boundary just around the 112 acres, this looks really bad because it's additional load in that 112 acres. But if you're looking at the miles that truck drives to get there, or to take to, you know, then it's a different story.
Some of this, that infrastructure for, like, as far as transformers or so on, is not too removed from what you'd need for wind, but as far as the amount of electricity it makes. But I know that's not in this report, but or well, anything we're a portion of renewables that we're looking at, but it's, I mean, to offset
so let's leave it for now. I'll do some math and then talk with this David Williams. And how do I get in touch with him?
I'll send you his email address.
Oh, thank you.
You're welcome.
And we might want to move something like what Yanni was recommending in terms of like planning for future changes, keeping up to date. We might want to consider that once we get to resilience, just as a form of not future proofing or.
I think that makes sense. Yes.
If I could bring up an additional, sorry.
Oh, yeah, we have lots of room, because I don't believe anybody is planning, probably with the exception of me, to put solar over their parking area. You know, it has such great benefits. It makes the if you have asphalt parking, makes it last a lot longer, of course. It's a lot cooler, everybody's cars. But we have room if we decide to do something with like one of the dock doors on each one of the and each industrial building is a solar charged port that these truckers can plug into. We have room to get the power. We really do, because I believe, Monty, we're just talking about rooftop, right, so far? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. and the cost of everything in the solar world is coming down so fast. It's really amazing. And the developments with cell efficiency, just in the last short amount of time, there's been some really interesting developments with cell efficiency. So I don't know, this is such an opportunity, and things are going to be so great. Oh boy, is this great.
If I could just raise
A
one
movie.
additional issue, and we had talked about this a while back, Monty, I don't know where it landed, but on-site electric car share.
Yeah,
know if it's included.
I talked to my friend Shannon Crabtree at Our Car about the EV network, and she was going to bring it back to the Our Car staff, and thought that just offhand, showing her the site plan and what we're talking about doing out here, that there was enough there that they'd be interested potentially in developing a strategy specifically for Hillcrest. It's probably about time for me to double back with her and see where that conversation went.
Sounds good.
That look good, Russ?
That looks great. And just so everyone is aware, what's happening in this letter are kind of these general consensus statements, but what's happening in the meeting minutes that I'm typing right now is the debate and the back and forth. So the statement about Monty talking to Shannon Crabtree and that they think Hillcrest is big enough to warrant a very specific car sharing strategy and approach, that's captured in the meeting minutes, which is just a different part of the documentation process for this work group.
And I guess my tendency would be to go a little further with the language and say include on-site electric car share. We don't have to specify what that strategy is going to be because we don't know yet.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Cool.
Good stuff.
Should we move to the next topic of healthy landscapes? Lots of trees, urban heat island, green space, species.
Is the urban design group, are they working on this also?
The urban design group has come up with a lot of very specific strategies about planting requirements, biodiversity requirements, and just the general look and feel of the planted areas. So including a biodiversity requirement that says that you can only plant up to 10% of the same genus on the site. So you can't have overrepresentation of any one kind of plant group, and up to 5% of any one species, which is a general rule of thumb that's being used more and more widely from the U of M extension program, which they really liked and wanted to formalize and include. Additionally, it also has a statement in their letter of consensus recommendations that turf grass is going to be used in extremely limited quantities, whether or not it's private property or public realm. And that there has to be some kind of additional programmatic requirement as to why you're using turf grass. So it's not just a beautiful rolling lawn for the sake of its lovely sterility. It's a rolling lawn because it's where people picnic or it's where kids play. And then everything else is going to have a very strong biodiversity requirement.
I'm really interested in their work to see what they came up with.
Their letter is 18 pages long. It's pretty fun.
Oh my God.
We added figures, that's why.
They were also meeting every other week. They had to learn a lot about urban design real quickly.
They sure did. Thanks, Russ. I'm going to use it as one of my cornerstone phrases now when I talk trash about turf grass. So rest assured that there are a lot of very, very elevated goals for healthy landscapes coming out of that group.
Cool.
There's nothing wrong with reiterating your statements and support here, though. Do you guys want to see anything change? Added? We're good?
Looks good to me.
All right, moving on to maximizing locally owned solar installations.
One thing about this section, and one thing about that ties in with the previous section is, and something that I like about the overall master plan is the district approach to the watershed, and then also the heating and cooling. And if we could frame this as a district approach to energy production as well, then that would sort of fit with that theme.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that idea of powering the ATES with the rooftop solar is fairly novel. We think it's fairly innovative. Department of Energy hasn't seen it done before. I just did one of my recent presentations. I was doing some research because we had a public official talking trash about ATES, about the Aquifer Thermal Energy Storage System. And so the folks at Evergreen sent me a research paper from a published scientific journal. There are over 2,500 ATES systems in the world. There are only, I think, 5 or 6 in the United States, and most of them date from the 70s and 80s, actually. Other than current ones being proposed, but that's this was an article from, I think, just last year. And so it is a well-proven technology, not here in the US. All of this to say it's one technology for a district energy system. It's what our technical team came up with. We do know Excel is exploring their own preferred technology for a district energy system, and whether or not that gets powered by rooftop solar. I mean, this group obviously, I think we've explained our approach and we think it's valid and we want to chase that. The conversation with Excel has been, that's fine. You guys want to go vet your technology and propose your technology for the site? Great. We're going to do the same. So let's run both tracks in parallel. So if one of these craps out, we have a backup option, right? Financially, technically, I mean, these are concepts at this point. And they've agreed that, yeah, let's run these in tandem. They have agreed not to, interfere or sort of unduly, get in the way of what we're trying to accomplish here. But they do have another game plan that we're not fully familiar with, another technology internally that they've been analyzing.
And what is their community engagement process?
Well, that's why that, for those of you that have wondered, like, all this work that you guys have been doing, what does it do? It gives us the opportunity to say, we have vetted this in community and we have gotten support for it. And here's why people support doing it the way we're suggesting it be done. So it is very helpful for these kinds of comments. I'm just trying to be transparent that, we're in the very early stages of some pretty complicated and novel approaches that if we are successful with, it really will be a model that has not been deployed in the United States before. And hopefully that means it'll attract some funding.
You mean when we're successful, Monty?
When we're successful. Thank you, John. This group, like, really, when I'm just feeling like the weight of the world is crushing my spirit, the optimism within this group, like, definitely gives me the will to keep on going. So thank you, guys.
Yeah. No, thank you. It's been a joy. It really has.
What about the research paper? Can you share that?
Yeah, I'd like to see that too.
Yeah. I'll send that to this group. I'll find it here while we're talking.
Well, we see that a couple folks have to hop off in 10 or 15 minutes, and we have about 1.5 pages left. So I wanted to just check with Russ and Iani, are there specific sections that you wanted to, or if anybody else did leave early, are there specific sections that you wanted to make sure we got to before you have to hop off? There's water, resilience, housing, any of the highlighted things too Monty wanted to touch on?
My only comment that I think these two guys should hear before they leave, scroll back up there a little bit. Recycling or composting centers, I totally get the circular economy thing. Waste transfer stations, real, actually true recycling centers where trucks of recycled materials are going to show up and be processed are generally pretty hard to locate in a neighborhood. One of the big environmental justice fights of the 90s was over in Minneapolis, resulted in the Green Institute being built, and it was all about locating a waste transfer station in that neighborhood. So I just wanted to check if really they meant recycling or composting centers. There is a yard waste composting center on Phelan Boulevard that the county runs, which is big. It's like 6 acres. It's a great free facility, but I don't know it's something that people really envision being in the middle of Hillcrest. So that was my only comment that we highlighted there. And in 21, I was just asking LHB if we didn't need to phrase this a little differently, because this one with its citations reads differently than all the other ones. None of the rest of them have that same kind of, research statement with some cited references, et cetera. So we were talking about maybe the comment about SNS activation, maybe that's phrased a bit more in the context of A above it, that it's one of these other benefits, but that maybe we don't want to start introducing cited references to this one as we haven't with the others. That was my only comment.
Yeah, I did notice that was a little heavy, and for a line item, because I could get, we could add, make this a much longer document and add add to all of these.
Yeah.
right. But I think I just the verbiage itself without citing, I think would be enough. But that's the only comment I have.
Yeah, so our thought was to kind of add that statement about the good things that wood does for the human body. So the positive impact insofar as reducing stress, reducing blood pressure and heart rate, and improving functions like digestion, recovery, and repair.
Mm-hmm.
And have it stated positively, and then removing the reference material just because we don't have the same kind of references throughout.
Right, the flow, yeah.
But John, I wanted to include it to make sure that you knew that we were incorporating all of your comments.
Sure.
So we could discuss it as a group before. And does that make sense, John? Are we good? Is that okay with you?
Yes. Refresh my memory here, because I was working on the truck charging thing, math. I just saw this stuff was removed. Tell me again, what's going on?
So simply because the rest of the document isn't really citing references. This is the only anomalous statement that's getting kind of in the weeds when it comes to like the background research behind the request. So it was the suggestion to simplify the statement and to bring it more in line with the verbiage of the rest of the document.
Oh, okay. Sorry, I didn't hear that.
Definitely appreciate the research and the thoroughness, John. Just wanted to make it read like the rest of the document.
No problem.
The LHB folks did a great job of cutting and pasting all of your homework into a fairly cohesive document, which is amazing, because it would look like a Frankenstein if it was me. So thank you, guys.
Does anybody have an objection to deleting the recycling or composting center comment? Because Monty is right. It's usually considered an incompatible use with residential areas, a lot to do with the smells they generate. And from a social justice equity standpoint, it's maybe not the best thing to propose for a neighborhood that has already traditionally been taking more than its fair share of grody smells.
Right.
and growing materials.
Right, I'm totally fine with deleting that. And I think I was more so thinking like, and I think I've brought it up in previous meetings too, is just like composting should be more widely available in St. Paul, and especially on the east side, it's kind of harder to get to right now. So that was just kind of the thinking there, or like centers that accept it mostly. But the other part of it was just, there's been some pushback from different work groups I've been in about having industry on the site, period. So I thought part of having more community buy-in is having jobs that are, I guess, greener. And I think we can keep that kind of general too, because there's so many more green industries out there than I even like know about.
You know, a few years ago when there was the, Russ, you probably remember the Blue-Green Alliance. So a few years ago, the labor unions joined with the environmental movement, and really, across the country, there's this whole Blue-Green Alliance thing. We were really being pushed to go find green manufacturers. To your point, Keely, one of the first things we did is we looked around our existing business centers, and we found green manufacturers that we never even knew were green manufacturers. We found folks making and distributing biodiesel in our barge terminals. We found folks custom wood products over on, not custom wood products, something wood products over in Williams Hill, right on 35E and Phelan. They make sustainably harvested wood end cap displays, retail displays for Whole Foods all over the country. They manufacture them right in one of our, every time we turn around, we're finding manufacturers that have found a way to make their operation sustainable. And sometimes they aren't even crowing about it. You have to ask them 5 times to realize they're doing some really cool stuff.
Mhm.
I like the idea of adding something like sustainably sourced products. Like, I think it's a recycling or composting center is different from the creation of products that are sustainably sourced on site,
Yeah.
right?
I would think so.
It's an interesting point, and that there's a ton of recycling related businesses actually in the West Midway area, where interestingly there's also a ton of new housing going in, and it's always interesting when new residents move in and are like, oh, wait a minute, it's smelly over here. Oh yeah, it's been smelly for a long time.
Keely, would you like to see a statement added to that last section? So there would be like 23, 24, and then identified an area of concern that the city of St. Paul just needs to provide more opportunities for recycling and composting that's more user friendly.
Yeah, I think that would be good as far as like additional recommendations.
Household organics program being piloted now and going to be available to everybody next year. So it's coming.
Nice.
I have mine. When you order the green bins, Russ, for the city, get something with a latch on it, because I have to put a block of concrete on mine to keep the raccoons out. So they're very, very clever. And we do great battle every week with the raccoons to keep them out of our chicken bones. But I love it. It's great.
How long before they outnumber the amount of humans in the Twin Cities is a question I think about often. Talk about invasive species. Oh my gosh.
They're successful urban generalists is how ecologists would think of them.
They're not as picky as we are about what they eat.
No, they don't mind half-rotten food. It's kind of their key to success.
Yeah. And boy, they're happy after eating it. Give them a
Becky,
salad, wilted salad, and they're so happy.
so Becky will be coming back to us, I'm sure, very shortly. So there was a statement toward the end, if you think you guys saw it highlighted, where I believe Iani added a statement about. Thank you. I'm very quotable today. Thanks, Russ. So as Becky's bringing the document back up, there's a statement that Iani included about pursuing Native American artworks and artists for a lot of the aesthetic aspects of the site. So we highlighted that one as well, not because it's not a fantastic idea, but because it's just not related to any of the sustainability measures. So I just wanted to include it again to let you know that like we saw it, we were thinking about it, we didn't just ignore it, but to give you our assurances that statements very similar to that are included in the urban design work group.
There is later this year, there's going to be an open spaces work group as well. And that is the work group that we've really targeted for engagement with indigenous communities to make sure that these open spaces are programmed and telling culturally relevant stories from those perspectives as well.
Wonderful. Yeah, no, I know it was out there, but
Just didn't want you to think that we were ignoring you because we were
I
definitely.
appreciate it.
And actually,
Sorry.
again, with the urban design work group, they have more specific language associated with it. So every single time there's a discussion point about involving Native American and tribal communities, there's a statement in there about compensating them and keeping them
Good.
involved in the design process from beginning, middle to end. So not just paying lip service to their involvement, but making them genuine co-creators.
Mm-hmm. Wonderful, yeah.
Sorry, I got disconnected for a second. Did we decide to delete this as it's covered elsewhere? And then is there language about the composting infrastructure that was discussed while I was trying to reconnect?
I think if we just add what you wrote in there, just like the city of St. Paul needs to provide more organics composting opportunities for residents and businesses, we can refine it offline.
I think, Russ, if you only have a couple more minutes, are there other points that you wanted to make sure you?
I appreciate it. And I think this is in really great shape. I mean, a lot of even the changes that we're making, I feel like are kind of important, but also around the margins. So just kudos on the great work that went into the initial document here. The one piece of feedback that I think is still kind of at the very end was something that I weighed in on, which is just like, in general, in terms of like ideal urban development, there is a lot of surface parking in this plan overall, and like John's may be an exception, particularly if it's going to have, covered in solar. But just like thinking about how we maximize, this space for all of our kind of community and climate purposes, that parking ultimately is like, we need to keep figuring out ways to maximize its uses, whether it's pervious or there's solar on top, or perhaps in the future less of it is needed. But that was my one sort of just like caveat to all of it. Was a future with less of that would make sense.
That is one of the issues where we run into these competing interests sometimes, or synergies that are challenging, particularly when looking to advance environmental strategies that have to plan for the foreseeable future, and economic development strategies that really have to plan for the needs of business today. And so, in our economic development world, those parking stalls represent jobs. And that's literally what the developers and the tenants and the business owners will tell us is, if you're telling me I'm going to build a building and you're saying I have to have 100 people in it, then I'm telling you, here's how much parking I need, or I can't get those people to work here if they don't have parking. So I'm with you. We have talked to the council member quite a bit about this. She would like to see these, Councilmember Yang would like to see these parking lots activated in the off hours. And so those are conversations we'll have, transaction by transaction, is how comfortable can we get this business? Some of them might be running 2 and 3 shifts. And so these parking lots and these loading areas may be very active. Some of them may not be, and maybe they don't run on the weekends. And so the idea of hosting, social and cultural activities, I think, is also another competing sort of interest out there. So we're looking at the future, but also realizing we got to do deals today for businesses that have people that need to show up to work today. And as a society, we really haven't provided them a lot of great other options. Not at this location,
Right.
And additionally, Russ, I would also add that the urban design work group also spent a solid amount of time talking about parking. And Matt Finn, one of the housing architects, suggested to them, and they accepted a recommendation that says that all high density residential has to pursue the density bonus related to structured parking. So basically, if you're building a high density building, you have to do it with structured parking for the most part. And then another work group member suggested that we decouple the rental of a unit from the use of a parking space. So it's less likely that there will be vacant parking space next to and underneath these buildings over time. So a business or a building owner can see 20 years from now, I'm like, nobody wants to rent out my 20 parking spaces underneath my building. Maybe I should do something better with that parking garage now. And then also providing hopefully the opportunity for affordable housing to pursue the structured parking density bonus without actually having to build structured parking, because it's cost prohibitive for that type of financing model, but it allows greater density for an affordable housing development. And a lot of these people don't need parking, period, because they don't own cars. So trying to look at different ways from a housing perspective that keeps parking areas as modestly scaled as possible.
That's great. Thank you. And of course, the city has gotten out of our own way on this by not having minimum parking requirements anymore. So it's all sort of being driven by other factors.
Yep. So if you know somebody at Metro Transit who can just swing the 64 down Larpenteur a little bit and get us a bus stop right there on the corner of Larpenteur and McKnight, that would be super. That would be a big help.
The
Yanni,
nice thing about the outdoor parking is it's 100% recyclable when we inevitably downscale the number of slots. So,
Yanni, were there any specific items that you wanted to talk about in your last 2 minutes before you have to go?
No. Well, we were gonna, let's see.
See you, Russ. Thank you. Have a good
Yeah,
weekend.
thank you. You too.
We were gonna get rid of the, not 25. Trying to see here. What line was it? Yeah, 2025. And no, there isn't at this point. And I'm sure something will come up and I'll just have to shoot an email, but yeah, that's how I work. That stuff pops up at the most oddest times, but yeah, so it's great. You guys did a really good job putting this together, because I know my ideas were all over the place. So, so thank you.
Problem. Keely, do you have any comments or final thoughts? We want to
no, I think we covered everything. There was nothing else like stood out to me at the moment, but I can email, I guess, too, if anything comes up.
Where'd it go?
Chelsea?
When will we be able to share this document?
Do you want to share the plan, Becky?
Sure. Yeah, so the idea for next steps is that we would do any final little edits, send the final draft to the whole working group to review, and then get your signatures on it. And then we are also hoping to use that one last meeting that I think we have on our calendars, but it wasn't necessarily planned. It is, I believe, June 20th that is held. And so if that's still a time that can work for this group. We're hoping to use that time for the group to kind of formally say, Port, here is our recommendations, and then for Monty to have the opportunity to walk through. And he did a little bit of it today, and respond and kind of talk through, these are the things that we're really happy to have your support, and we'll take this, to funding sources. And these are the things where we might need to keep pushing on it, and any ways that you can help. And here are the things that it will be really hard to get incorporated into the project, and here's why. So that's the idea for the next meeting. So I don't know, Monty, if you'd say in terms of this being shared. Monty's either very, very still or froze. He's glaring at me a little bit. Monty, are you there?
No.
Careful, he does have COVID. Give me a pass.
I think Monty'd have to have the final say on when it can be shared. I'd
Sure.
assume certainly after that June 20th date.
24th.
24th, thank you.
Okay.
Yes. So Friday, June 24th. Is that going to work out for everybody to have a meeting 6 on June 24th? At same time, same place.
Yes.
Okay. Great.
I will probably not be able to attend that one. I'll be in a pre-law institute that takes place during this hour of the day.
Okay.
Sorry, guys, I dropped off there. I'm not sure what I missed, but it sounded like you were talking next steps.
So we're
We were
talking about
speculating on your health because you were frozen.
I'll make it.
So hopefully most people can attend on June 24th to formally present this signed letter to Monty, and then hear Monty's comments about how the port is going to metabolize all of these recommendations. Before that takes place, do you guys have any thoughts about how you would prefer to sign this document, either electronically or with an actual pen? Because you can either sign a piece of paper and take a picture of it, and then we can just like Photoshop it into the document, or we can physically bring you the document and have you sign it.
I think the least carbon footprint would be to photo and send it.
Sure. Is everybody okay with
Be
electronic?
ironic if we all drove our SUVs over to sign it or something.
Yeah, if I'm
I don't
sent a
have an
PDF,
SUV.
I can sign it electronically.
Okay. So everybody's okay with electronically signing the document?
And then you'll send a final out before June, or by the end of, or before our next meeting, of course, and so we can.
Yes, so there's
Yeah.
very little cleanup to do on this letter. You guys have been very, very orderly and I think helpful with your final comments and everything. So we will ideally have like the final thing ready to look at within the next week. And then
wonderful.
if everybody reads through it and we get 8 email thumbs up saying like no changes, it's perfect. We can get your guys' electronic signatures on the super final version, and then have that be the thing that we gift to Monty at the beginning of meeting 6, and then hear all about what the port's going to do about it.
Yeah, I'm happy to give you my my feedback. I as myself can't stamp it approved and say, yep, we're going to write all this verbatim into these covenants. There is a process by which I've got to get through my internal development team, our internal credit committee, board credit committee. Ultimately, these covenants will get approved by our board. And I need that to happen in like July. Because we'll be out in the marketplace with an improved master plan, and people are going to want to know what they have to do. So this will get formalized fairly quickly, and at every one of those steps, even if I were to copy and paste this and say, this is all going in the covenants verbatim, at every one of those steps, there are opportunities for folks to nip and tuck and haggle with me on a variety of these things. So, but no, I think in June certainly can give you feedback on what I think that outcome is going to be, and where I think we're going to have issues, and where some of it is just going to be based on technological and financial feasibility. Is going to be part of the analysis. Is what's a slam dunk and what's going to be a reach and why is it going to be a reach? Is it market? Is it politics? Is it technical? Is it financial? But I'll be able to
I
get
gotta drop off. Feel better, Monty.
Yeah. See you, Yanni. Thank you.
Monty, I
wanted
want to
to
say
make-
something to you. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, yeah, John, I wanted to make sure you had a chance to have any final comments, and then Chelsea, if you had anything else other than that question. You can go. John?
Well, Monty, you touched my heart with your being shot with arrows, you know, being the pioneer. And I just want to, I always go back to Twain. He says you're a crank until you have success. And then you're a genius, you know. And this is going to be a success. It will. And it's going to have such a ripple effect. And it's going to be a really big deal. So.
Thank you.
Doing a good job.
Thank you for the support, guys. That makes it easier to keep tilting at windmills. No pun intended.
Chelsea, do you have any final comments in addition to your question?
No, that's all for me. I enjoyed being part of this, and I learned a lot about the process, and I learned from the people in the group too. So, thank you all.
Thank you. Thanks for your great questions. Okay, my phone's gonna go dead. I'll see you later.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I think we've
Thanks,
covered everything
everyone.
we intended to cover, so we can end a little bit early. Thank you so much, everybody.
Awesome. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks.
Thank
It's been
you,
great
Keely.
working
Thank you,
with you
Chelsea.
all.
You guys have been wonderful. Thank
Thank
you
you.
very much.
Have a good weekend.
Bye.
Bye.
Hey, is it just us?